Jo Swinson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Some members in the House will know that I'm a bit of a fan of new technology. I like using podcasts and Twitter and Facebook to engage with my constituents. And in particular, I have campaigned in the House to actually allow clips of Parliament to be showed on YouTube, for example, through Early Day Motion 1104. So perhaps amidst all the criticism, we should also be commending the Prime Minister for at least trying to embrace new technology. Sadly, I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, he hasn't quite got the hang of it. Now, the Prime Minister said in his YouTube video that he wanted to hear the public's views on MPs' expenses in a moment. But then he did the online equivalent of putting his hands over his ears by disabling the comment function. It just doesn't make sense. I'll give way to the Honourable.
I share the Honourable Member's enthusiasm for new technology, but my fundamental problem with the appearance on YouTube is what should have happened is either the Prime Minister or the Leader of the House should have come to this House and made a statement which could have been questioned. That is the fundamental objection to the YouTube nonsense.
The Honourable Lady has made her point, and it certainly is true that there were many concerns with the procedural way in which this came to our attention, although I think that the concept of the government trying to reach out more through electronic technology is in itself a good one, but as I say, has to be done properly. But that's the thing, because the Prime Minister doesn't really do listening. Instead, in a frantic rush to be seen to be doing something, anything about this issue, he didn't stop to think whether he was doing the wrong thing about the issue. Now, we had that ridiculous proposal, apparently in the means to try and promote better transparency, to basically give you the cash, no questions asked, for turning up to the House of Commons. I'm very glad that that did not make it onto the order paper in front of us today, but there's no denying that the government confusion and U-turns and general lack of consultation has been deeply unhelpful to this whole debate. Now, I do have a certain sympathy with the Leader of the House, because she has been sent here today to attempt to clear up, frankly, this whole disastrous episode, and it's not an easy job for her to do. And I have to say, I have a lot of sympathy also with those who have said that it doesn't make any sense for us to vote on the later motions now that the government is accepting the amendment to the first motion. And I think that is a slightly farcical situation for us all to be in, to say, leave it all to Kelly and then have these votes. It would have been much better if a small number of urgent changes had been consulted on properly, brought forward and then enacted with a minimum fuss. Instead, we've had this mix of some good changes, along with many half-baked ideas, and some changes that would have frankly just made the whole system murkier. But that said, we all know the depth of public anger on this issue. And so I think we have to ask ourselves, given that these motions are indeed before us today, if the government does intend to press forward with them, given that the Kelly report may not be completed until the end of the year and changes therefore may not be well into 2010, is it justifiable to vote against measures today that would clamp down on some of the abuses of the system? And I have to say, I think not. Motion 5 in particular, I think, is long overdue. To ensure that receipts should be provided for every expense that we incur in our parliamentary duties just seems to be common sense, rather than saying that if something's under £25, it doesn't need a receipt. It's something I've called for in this House before, and I will certainly be supporting today. Most of our constituents cannot understand that there's a different rule for the House of Commons than in the real world, where in most jobs, expense claims are, as a matter of course, accompanied by receipts. So we clearly can deal with some of the issues today, but many more complex reforms are needed, and as many honourable members have said, the House of Commons has already shown itself, sadly, not really to be very well tasked and up to the job of making these reforms, whether that was the vote last July, which kicked out the reforms proposed by the MEC, whether that was the government trying to keep everything secret back in January, or even the mess that we've seen created over the past 10 days. And that's why the independent review by Sir Christopher Kelly is so important. Because there are many other issues of concern that I'm sure everybody has had constituents raise with them, particularly on the issue of second homes. People don't understand the designation of second homes issue, that it seems to be possible for it to be decided upon for the convenience of the MP. Clearly that has to change. There's the whole John Lewis list issue, which again has caused huge public outcry and anger. And the other issue, I would say, is one of MPs making capital gains from properties partly funded by the taxpayer. Now, I know that when that issue is raised, there's an argument in the House, and I understand the argument that it is often cheaper for the taxpayer to pay the mortgage interest on a bought property. And I'm sure that the flat that I rent may cost more, particularly with interest rates as they are, than the flats that some honourable members have bought and claimed for the mortgage interest on. But surely it would not be impossible to design a system where the House of Commons has a portfolio of accommodation and therefore the House of Commons benefits from the capital gain. So over time, the cost to the taxpayer would actually reduce. Now, we will all make our own representations to the Kelly Review, but Madam Deputy Speaker, it's absolutely clear that the best way to proceed is to have an impartial arbiter to make a comprehensive set of proposals that we can then use to start rebuilding public trust. But what I would say is that transparency has to be a fundamental principle of any MP's expenses system, because then whatever the system is, if there are problems with it, then they will very soon come to attention and be nipped in the bud. And that's why, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will be voting to increase transparency in the expenses system today.